So let's talk about something that's, well, really important. We're going to go through some of the signs of mental illness that you just shouldn't ignore. It's all about getting a better handle on what might be going on inside our own minds. Have you ever had that feeling? You know the one, where something just feels off? You can't quite put your finger on it, but you know you're not yourself. It can be a really unsettling and honestly a pretty lonely feeling. But here's the thing you've got to remember. You are not alone in feeling that way. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, points out that what might just feel like a temporary funk can sometimes be a sign that something deeper is going on. So let's start right there with that off feeling. Let's dive into some of the emotional warning signs that tell us, hey, maybe it's time to pay a little closer attention to what we're feeling. All right, first up, persistent sadness. Look, everybody feels sad sometimes. That's just part of being human. But the key word here, the one we really need to focus on, is persistent. So everyday sadness, it comes and it goes, right? It usually fades over time. But a real warning sign is different. The American Psychiatric Association says that if you're feeling an intense sadness that sticks around for more than 2 weeks, that could actually be a sign of depression. And I think the National Institute of Mental Health really hits the nail on the head here. This isn't about willpower. That feeling of not being able to just snap out of it, that's a clear signal that these feelings need to be taken seriously. Okay, number 2 on our list, extreme mood swings. We're talking about those emotional roller coasters that can just seem to come out of absolutely nowhere. So what's the difference between a normal mood shift and a potential warning sign? Well, our moods change day to day, of course, but NAMI warns that if you're having these dramatic swings, big shifts in your mood, your behavior, your energy levels that just don't match what's happening in your life, that could be a sign of something like bipolar disorder. And then there's sign number 3, that feeling of uncontrollable worry and anxiety. You know, we all worry, but this is when the worry completely takes over and it feels like you just can't turn it off. And, it's rarely just worry, is it? An anxiety disorder can show up in a ton of different ways. You might have trouble relaxing or sleeping. Your thoughts might be racing a mile a minute. You could even have physical aches and pains that you can't explain. So you might be wondering, when is it time to actually do something? Well, here's a really clear guideline from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. If you've been feeling this way on most days for 6 months or more, it's probably a really good idea to talk to a professional. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about internal feelings. Now let's look at some changes in our daily behavior, things that maybe even other people might notice. Next up, we have social withdrawal. And look, we all need our alone time, right? That's totally healthy. But this is something different. This is when you start consistently avoiding people or skipping out on things you used to love to do. That can be a sign of depression, anxiety, or even a psychotic disorder. All right, sign number 5 is a big one, sleep. And this can go both ways. You could be sleeping way too much, that's called hypersomnia, or you could be sleeping way too little, which is insomnia. Either way, major changes in your sleep patterns are a huge red flag. And check out this data from Harvard. It's pretty staggering. While maybe 18% of the general population has issues with sleep, that number jumps to a full 50% for people with a mental illness. The connection is just incredibly strong. All right, let's talk about sign number 6. And this is a really common one, substance abuse. When someone's struggling with all these intense emotions, it's not surprising that they might turn to alcohol or drugs to try and cope, to kind of self-medicate. In fact, get this, according to mentalhealth.gov, a full quarter of people with a mental illness use substances to try and manage their symptoms. That's 1 in 4. It's a widespread coping mechanism, but it's one that usually ends up making the real problem even worse. Okay, now we're going to move into some of the more severe signs, including struggles with reality itself and just being able to function day to day. So that brings us to our 7th sign, delusions or hallucinations. Now, I know that can be a scary word, psychosis, so let's just break down what it actually means. Basically, psychosis is a belief or a perception that feels incredibly real and urgent to the person experiencing it, even when there's evidence that it's, not real. It's essentially a break from our shared reality. And you might think this is super rare, but NAMI reports that 3 out of every 100 people will actually experience a psychotic episode at some point in their lives.
So it's a lot more common than many of us think.
All right, sign number 8 is having a really hard time just dealing with normal life. And this is more than just having a rough week. This is when someone is really struggling to function at work, at school, or at home for several weeks or even longer. Okay, this next section is incredibly important. We're talking about critical cries for help, the most urgent signs that tell us immediate help is needed. Sign number 9 is extreme anger outbursts. Now, we all get angry, of course, but we're talking about something else here. This is anger that feels completely out of proportion to what's happening, and it feels impossible to control. It can be a symptom of a lot of things, like unresolved trauma or anxiety. And finally, we've come to sign number 10, thoughts of self-harm or suicide. This is so important to talk about. If you or someone you know is experiencing this, please know it is a direct and urgent cry for help. And it's so important to realize that these thoughts are not as uncommon as you might think. The Mental Health Foundation reports that up to 10% of young people have had them. Talking about this and reducing the stigma is absolutely key to helping people speak up. And this is the crucial part. Research shows that the vast majority, we're talking about 90%, of people who die by suicide were suffering from a treatable mental illness. This totally reframes these thoughts, not as some kind of choice, but as a severe symptom of an illness. So please, if you take anything away from this, let it be this. These thoughts are a symptom. Just like a fever is a symptom of an infection, they are a sign of an underlying problem that can be treated. Help is absolutely out there, and you deserve to get it. So, after going through all these signs, you might be thinking, okay, now what? Let's talk about the path forward. Let's talk about next steps. Listen, the single most important thing to remember is this. Experiencing any of these symptoms does not mean you are bad or weak. It's a signal. It is your mind and your body telling you that it is time to take care of yourself. And what does taking care of yourself look like? It means reaching out. Here are some really practical places you can start. You can contact your insurance company, look up a local college's counseling clinic, or find your county's crisis line. There are people who are ready and waiting to help you. So, I'm going to leave you with this question to think about. It doesn't have to be some huge, monumental thing. Just what is one small step you can take for your mental health today?